I don't know if there's much more for me to say because, mashallah, we had our Shaykh Abu Aliya before me. And so I was just trying to fill myself up with what he had discussed so that I don't bore you. Anyway. Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. Wassalatu wassalamu ala al-mabu'uthi rahmatan lil alamin wa ala alihi wa sahbihi wa baraka wa sallama tasliman kathiran ila yawmiddin. Amma ba'd. قال الله تعالى واعتصموا بحبل الله ولا تفرقوا وقال تعالى بل هو آيات بينات في صدور الذين أوتوا العلم صدق الله العظيم. I'm going to just share some different anecdotes, not some kind of properly organized talk, because I think there's some that I have this issue, and I also have a lot of relief that I want to share with you, something I've been thinking about in just the last year. So for the last 20 years, maybe 25 years, there's been a massive brain drain. There's been a massive time waste. People going around, what's your madhhab? Why do you follow this? Why don't you follow that? Not any kind of serious discussion or constructive study, but what you're doing, what the majority is doing, what your forefathers were doing is wrong. It's a bid'ah. Forget bid'ah, it was kufr and shirk and dal and mudil and every swear word you can find. That was the discussion. So that was for the last 20 years, actually 25 years. I wrote a book on this subject in 1994 or 95. I think 1994, 95. It's been a long time. And the book was just trying to show the evidences for the Hanafi way of prayer, which is pretty much followed by and practiced by 50% of the Muslims around the world, minimum. That came under attack, that it's wrong. So I remember at that time going to different countries in the world, and in some countries they were not willing to even provide evidence because they said, no, we're pandering to the whole discussion. I think it was important to provide evidence. And alhamdulillah, now I can say in the last 2-3 years, there is, mashallah, aside from maybe a small group of madkhalis, I'm not really too well versed with the different names, but as far as I understand, aside from a small group of madkhalis who still are beating the same drum and have not matured yet in that regard, mashallah, mashallah, or other brothers who used to be anti-madhhab or Salafi or whatever the terms were at that time, alhamdulillah, alhamdulillah, we can embrace one another, live together as the Muslim Ummah should. And it's such a good feeling. Last 2-3 years have been amazing. And then this feeling of euphoria, this feeling of comfort and success and relief was shattered. I was in Australia this Ramadan, and people had stayed awake for the 27th night. And then we prayed Fajr, and then we were waiting for the Ishraq, and I had a little talk, and then I finished. And there was a newcomer there in the masjid, a very large masjid, there was a newcomer there. So after I finished, and generally after Fajr, there's a number of people that come and ask questions, and then after that, as I was going away from there, I called this brother along and said, he's got a few questions. He wants to meet you. Assalamu alaikum. Where are you from, brother? In Iraq. He's from Iraq. I thought he was Saudi, but he was dressed like that. Alhamdulillah, wonderful. I talked about Iraq, I talked about Baghdad, I talked about A'zamiyya, where Imam A'zam Abu Hanifa rahimahullah used to stay, where he's buried. But his purpose was something else. His purpose was, we need to discuss the issue of saying that Amina. Oh man, we're just 25 years of this, we just, alhamdulillah, now in England, we're relaxing. Right? I'm like, come on, are you serious? People have just stayed awake for most of the night or much of the night. They've done worship. 27-1, he said, this is important, this is the ilm, we have to study. This is the ilm, we have to study, but you choose times for things, and whether there's an appetite or whether it's even worth it. Because I was then told that he actually goes to different masajid and he engages people and convinces them like this. When I say confused, obviously he wants people on his side. It was very polite, but it was the wrong thing. It was very, very polite. Because generally who we've dealt with in the past, they were not very polite at all. Because they would just see that you are wrong, you are totally misled, you are totally deviant, and I need to correct you. So they won't even listen to you. It's very difficult to get even to listen. And there's always good people among them, mashallah. So I can't say they're all like that, but this is what. But this brother was very polite, mashallah. And I'm telling him, look, brother, let me tell you, you are wasting your time. He said, how are we wasting time? I said, there's a number of other things we can discuss. People are losing their faith. And the Ameen bil Jahr issue, meaning saying Ameen aloud or silently, both views exist. In most Muslims, it's not a fard and obligation at all. It's not an obligation at all. The Hanafi madhab, if you did it, you wouldn't be sinful, but it's preferable not to do it. Whereas in the Shafi and Hanbali madhab as well, it's preferable to do it. But I'm sure if you missed it, it wouldn't be major wrong or anything like that. So why do you need to discuss this on a day like this, especially when people want to now go to sleep? Why would you want to discuss it? It's just that there was a mission. What it was is that whenever anybody, any group of people are driven with a mission, to say that, look, you need to go and correct people, then they don't see night or day. They don't see black or white. They don't think actually. Then they want to just correct everybody because you're a man on a mission. If only people can replace that for a bigger mission, to save people from haram, to save people from shirk and kufr and atheism and all the other deviances which are out there, and to bring other people into Islam. I said, brother, what's your background? What have you studied? So when I started studying engineering, and then I left the whole kufr system or something like that, he mentioned. That this is the only thing that you've got time to do them. So it looks like in some countries there's still an issue. People haven't matured. But alhamdulillah, in this country, I was actually invited last year, 7 months ago, to a retreat, a big family retreat, which is run by all ex-Salafis, And I was a bit apprehensive, but it was, mashallah, what brotherhood now. Didn't feel strange at all. Alhamdulillah, people have really, really mature, but there are still some elements, I don't know, they have nothing better to do in life. That is, I hate speaking like this, but I just want to put the situation, I just wanted to share these thoughts. And alhamdulillah, a lot of people have matured, but some people haven't yet. So now, I'm going to just ask you a few questions. Looks like these guys are getting excited about the questions. So I want you to mention, now listen to this, I want you to mention the names of, and this can be done collectively. I'm going to write down the names of 5 scholars, 5 great scholars, from after the scholars of the hadith books like Bukhari, Muslim, and so on, after them, and from before 100 years ago. I just want you to mention the names of up to about 5 scholars that you think everybody would know about. The most famous ones, that you would think about. I did this in Middlesex University, and the first 3-4 names came up were Fadilat Sheikh Abdul Aziz bin Baz. Sorry, that's 13. Then Uthaymeen, right? Ibn Uthaymeen, rahimahullah. I said again, that's this. Al-Bani, I said, come on, man. And then when I pushed him, I said, okay, Ibn Taymiyyah and Ibn Qayyim. I said, you have not, they could not mention just about. Then finally, when I really pushed it, then they brought someone. Otherwise, these are the 5 people that people mention only, as though all of Islamic scholarship relies on them. So now I'm going to ask you a question. So it has to be over 100 years ago, approximately, and from maybe the 3rd century onwards. Go on, 5 names. Yes, go on. No, that he's too early. He died in 150 Hijri, so he's too early. Which Hanifa are you talking about anyway? Imam Hanifa, Imam Abu Hanifa. Okay, I thought maybe you guys know about another Hanifa. Hanifa is a girl's name. Abu Hanifa means the father of Hanifa. Technically, that's what it means. But you're talking about the big Imam, right? But he died in 150 Hijri. That's very early. I want somebody after him. Yes, brothers. Yes. Harun al-Rashid, not bad. Although that's within the first 2 centuries as well. He wasn't, I mean, he must have been a scholar in his own right, but he's not known. He is the big Khalif of the Abbasids. Have you guys? Okay, 300 years ago. Yeah. Imam, no, he's too early. He just died recently. You need to go beyond that. Yes, brother. Shah with your life, sir. Okay, I'll take that. Shah with you. Go ahead. MashaAllah, MashaAllah, Subhanallah, Zabardast. Imam Ghazali, okay. 3 more, yes. Louder. Now, after all of the Hadith scholars, after all of the Imam Bukhari, Tirmidhi, Abu Dawud, after them. Yes. Okay, just think about it and come back to this. Which one of you we can use both of you? Comes a bit, yeah. He said Ibn. Yeah. Yeah, he said it correctly for the Maliki one. Yes. Come on, man. I mean, if I start asking about football players, mashallah, history you'll give me. Imam ibn Taymiyyah, so he gave a clue on that one. So I'm going to leave that as I can use that as well. But still, I want 2 more. MashaAllah, barakallahu fi Imam Suyuti in Egypt. He's got a nice big, I mean, I've been to his place. I've been to his burial. Yes. Good stuff. Now, mashallah, they're running now. Ibn Hajar al-Asqalani. Okay. Any more? Yes. Louder. I can't hear you. No, he passed away about 20, 30 years ago. Used to be before. Okay, so anyway, we've got 5 names here. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 names actually. Now, these are the 5 names that you think about, right? If you want a good measure, put Ibn Qayyim in here as well. Yes. Yeah. He just died. No, this has to be over 100 years ago. Otherwise, you'll be mentioning our husband Moise, and there's lots of people you can mention. I'm talking about 100 years ago. Yes. Okay, Jalal bin Mahali. Okay, so this is what I'm going to say now. These are the biggest names in your mind. These are people you listen, you hear their name. This is who are quoted and so on. So let's see how many of them follow the madhhab. Because if madhabs are not important, I'm sure they've been, I'm sure Shaykh Ali has emphasized that point and established. But if it wasn't important, then why would these big people follow a madhab? Or associate themselves with a madhab, work within a madhab, scholars of the madhab, be part of that process. So if we start with Shah Waliullah, Shah Waliullah is supposed to be Hanafi, right? He is obviously, I'll explain that later. It was Ibn Arabi, Rahimahullah. No, it was Ghazali. Ghazali was a Shafi'i. He was a Shafi'i madhab, right? Ibn Arabi was a Maliki. Imam Suyuti was a Shafi'i. Ibn Hajar al-Asqalani was a Shafi'i. It looks like Shafi'is dominates, even though they're the 3rd largest madhab after the Hanafis and Malikis. But for some reason, they've done something, mashallah, that they seem to dominate. And then you had Ibn Taymiyyah, who was Hanbali. He was Hanbali, his father was Hanbali, his grandfather was Hanbali. Was his son Hanbali as well? Oh, mashallah. Go ahead. So, in fact, I think there's one book that both he and his father and his grandfather wrote together, Usul or something. Yeah, that's mashallah. So they were Hanbalis. Now, many of these scholars, like Ibn Hajar al-Asqalani, they were Shafi'i. But there were some positions where they went against the Shafi'is or took something else. few visits, but they were proud Shafi'is. Imam Shafi'ullah, in some cases, he did espouse some other views, but he was Hanafi. Likewise, Ibn Arabi, you probably find something from him where he may have departed. I think he's got a statement about the moving of the fingers. You know, when you tashahhud the Malikis, there's a view in the fingers. I think he mentions that here, when you shawish, it's distraction. So, what I'm trying to say is that if you take even other big scholars of the Hanafis like Imam Tahawi, they were all within the madhhab, but because they were such great scholars and at a level of ijtihad where they could do this juridical analysis and endeavor on their own, they did depart sometimes. But they had a right to do that. But they were all within a madhhab. Yes, I will mention to you names of scholars that were outside of the madhhab. It had been, and there were some few famous ones, but they were a minority. There are people like Dawood al-Zahiri, Ibn Hazm al-Zahiri, the other Ibn Arabi, the Shaykh, he was Zahiri. We have a minority who was Zahiri. Zahiri means they say we're going to take from the apparent meaning of the text, and there's a complicated ijtihad and so on and so forth. The overwhelming majority of ulama. In the last 30 years, this all comes about, don't follow them. So what should we follow instead? And this was something that I thought about for a very long time. What should we follow instead? It wasn't sounding right. They said, let's follow Quran and Sunnah directly. Let's follow Quran and Sunnah directly. I've been dealing with this since the beginning, since the 1990s, as Shaykh was as well, right? So something doesn't make sense. The reason is that if the call is, which is a beautiful call, follow the Quran and Sunnah directly. Recently on a radio TV show, question answer, somebody said, what madhhab did Imam Abu Hanifa follow? So my answer was that he followed the Hanafi madhhab. Globally speaking. What else is he going to follow? Because the Hanafi madhhab is not some innovation. It's just an interpretation, one interpretation. Now what happens is that those people who say follow Quran Sunnah directly, so okay, fine. I'm going to take Bukhari, Muslim and many other hadith and I'm going to go directly, right, and find the hadith about the issue I'm dealing with, and I'm going to follow that. Okay, are you happy now that I'm following this? Brother, what's your answer? Let me see, what is your opinion you follow? So I said, this is my opinion. I said, no, that's wrong. I said, well, you said follow Quran Sunnah. I said, this is the hadith. No, but this hadith is not the one that we accept, or is not the one that we would take as the view, because Ibn Uthaymeen or Sheikh bin Baz or Albani did not go with this one, they went with the other one. You said follow Quran Sunnah directly. This is Sahih Hadith. No, that's not. You have to follow it through the lens of our scholars. This only hit me about 7 years ago, after about 19 years of banging my head on this. That what people are pointing towards is just the fifth month. It's not Quran Sunnah. It is Quran Sunnah, but it's through the evidence. So if you take Quran and Sunnah directly, but it does not match up with what their scholars said, they will not accept it. So what they're saying is follow the Quran and Sunnah through our scholarship. To our scholars. I said, well, then it's just my scholars against your scholars. My scholars are older. They've stood the test of 1300 years. They were closer. They were tabi'een. Imam Abu Hanifa was tabi'i, rahimahullah. They were closer to time of the sunnah in practice. Today, can you go anywhere in the world where you actually see the sunnah in practice the way he was in the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam? No. So for example, technically, if I wanted to start a new madhhab today, maybe technically I could, but it would be purely theory-based. What that means is that I would just have to put on and Sunnah text, and I would have to just apply that. And what they had then, like Imam Malik in Medina Munawwara, is he had the text in front of him on the Quran and Sunnah, but he also had people, by seeing the Sahaba, doing what they saw the Sahaba doing, what they saw the Prophet doing. So he could actually can confirm what he's reading, but not just confirm, but get an example and a clarification of what he's reading to what's being practiced. Same with Imam Abu Hanifa rahimahullah, because Ibn Masud radiallahu anhu, Abdullah ibn Masud radiallahu anhu, Ali and others had moved to Kufa. Numerous Sahaba had moved to Kufa, and obviously they had not started a new way. They continued to practice the Islam that they had learned in Medina Munawwara. So now in Kufa, this had been spread there. Imam Abu Hanifa took from the heritage just within the 50 years that it was there. You see the difference now? So why should I now take from somebody today who comes with a new idea? Even though Ibn Taymiyyah rahimahullah used to follow a madhhab, yes, he had divergences. He had opinions that were separate, but he still considered himself, broadly speaking, within the Hanbali school. I mean, the Hanbali school has a lot of room for opinion anyway, I guess, right? To a certain degree. Yeah. So, do you understand what we're saying here? There is no pure following of the Quran. Why is there no pure following of the Quran? Meaning there is. It is a following of something. So it's through something, because unless you're a big scholar in your own right and you develop your own madhhab. And I already said, if you want to develop your own madhhab, you're still going to be at a disadvantage because you don't have any practical manifestation of what the Prophet was doing and what the Sahaba were doing. Because that's been lost now. Which community in the world still has proper Sunnah lifestyle? Which community in the world? Saudi Arabia, some village in Pakistan, Afghanistan, Taliban, Mauritania. They might have remnants of, they might have some aspects, alhamdulillah, I mean, people there, broadly speaking, but pure, where you can see, wow, this is how the Prophet lived, this is how the Sahaba acted. That would be a bit complicated. So then what's important now, though, is still to understand why there are differences. Why can't there just be one way? A lot of people, sincere people, like, why is there a difference of opinion? Why are we so divided? This is, you know, there's utopian ideas in people's mind. They would love to just see everything in synchrony, you know, everything to be one way. A lot of people, if they don't understand this, they're like, why can't it just be one way? And that's a genuine question. Like, why can't it be one way? Well, there's good reasons for that. There's a ontological reason, which I'll talk about later, but there's a very practical, simple reason. And then there's a wisdom behind it. And there's other reasons as well. In the time of the Prophet ﷺ, different things happened. Different occasions arose. Different answers were needed. So, for example, what's your name? Brother Sa'id came to the Prophet ﷺ and said, look, I've got this question. So the Prophet ﷺ would respond to him based on his circumstance. Then, what's your name? Faisal. Faisal or Faisal? Okay. The discriminator, the distinguisher. So Faisal comes, Prophet given another, based on his context, another response. One person came to the Prophet ﷺ, the discussion was about whether you can kiss your wife in Ramadan. No. Another person said it was okay. To another person, it was okay. Why? One was freshly married, the other one was veteran married. Now, we don't know who came first, or if somebody doesn't know that this one was older, this one was younger, they're going to think this is a contradiction. You can open up Sahih al-Bukhari, you know, the book that everybody wants to go to, and you'll find within the same chapter, same broad chapter, hadiths that seem to contradict one another. One says do it, the other one says don't do it. If you look at any of these hadiths, like Sahih Sunan al-Tirmidhi, Imam Tirmidhi will have a chapter saying, the chapter of those who say it is permissible to do X, Y, and Z, mention a hadith. Then he'll have another, and then he'll mention who takes that view. Then he'll have another chapter in which he says those who say you should not do this. And then he'll have the view of those as well. There's hadith for all of this. That's why it's very difficult to study Sahih al-Bukhari with a comment, without a commentary. Very, very difficult. I mean, you think, because it's just all many Sahih hadith put together, right? With different different points of view, trying to, you know, Imam Bukhari is trying to put through different points of view with it, but you need to comment. That's why there's tens of commentaries written in multi-volumes. So there's I mean, there's numerous examples of this I can give you. For example, the Prophet ﷺ accepted Bakr radiallahu anhu all of his wealth, and he gave it for the expedition of the from Umar radiallahu anhu, it was half. From others, when they went, like Sa'd ibn Abi Waqqas radiallahu anhu, when he wanted to give his in the path of Allah, he said no. وَالثُّلُثُ كَثِيرٌ. He said you can only give 1/3, and even 1/3 is too much. Leave it for your inheritors. Why did he accept Abu Bakr radiallahu anhu, half from Umar radiallahu anhu, and only 1/3? Oh, they were different occasions. So it depends on the person, how much the person knows they can rely on it. So what do you take from you? Are you allowed to give up your wealth? Or aren't you allowed? The scholars will look at the hadith and they will decide, oh, this was particular context, it was a very specific person. Most people aren't like Abu Bakr radiallahu anhu. I mean, Abu Bakr radiallahu anhu was amazing. After he migrated to Medina Munawwara, when they were on their way to Medina Munawwara, it took them some time to get to Medina Munawwara. His father, who had become blind by now, Abu Quhafa radiallahu anhu, he'd become blind now. He started saying to Abu Bakr's daughter, his granddaughter, Asma radiallahu anhu, what did your father left for us? He's taken everything because they needed their supplies for the way. What has he left for us? So look at the daughter of this man. He was blind. Abu Quhafa, her grandfather, was blind. She led him to a pile of pebbles that felt like dirhams or coins. Put a cloth over it, said, look, put his hand over it and said, look how much he's left for us. He left over these stones for him. He thought it was money, obviously. That's the family we're dealing with here. They can give 100% in the path of Allah and they'll be happy. And they won't feel disgruntled after. But not everybody can do that. That was special, right? That's one example. There's a number of examples. There's another hadith in which Ibn Umar radiallahu anhu would narrate that the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam said that the deceased, the dead person, is punished due to the crying of his house. So if you cry after somebody dies in your family, you're the person who has just died, that you're crying over, he's going to be punished because you cried. That's what it seems to say, right? However, Aisha radiallahu anha said that no, she knew the story. She knew the inside story when she was in the Prophet. She said that no, that was very particular Jewish woman. That the Prophet stated this about a very particular Jewish woman upon whom her household was crying. So this is not a general rule. So you can see now, if somebody doesn't know that, they've just heard the one hadith, they're going to say, oh, the deceased is going to get a lot of punishment if anybody cries. Now, we would say that the deceased would be punished if he told people and requested that people cry and make a big scene at his grave, then yes, he would be punished, to wail and so on. Like, if he didn't do that and people were just doing it, then inshallah he should not be punished. Why should he be punished? Can you see how you have a general hadith or hadith about a particular situation that could be maybe misunderstood to be more comprehensive about everything? On one occasion, the Prophet ﷺ was in Jumu'ah giving khutbah, and suddenly there's a man who came in who looked very disheveled and torn clothing and everything. His name was Sulaik from the Banu Ghatafan tribe. And the Prophet ﷺ in the khutbah suddenly told people to donate, and he stopped the khutbah. According to one narration, he actually stopped the khutbah as well. Now, would you do that today? I shouldn't promote this to be honest. I mean, some of the really people like hang in the middle of the when you got everybody's attention. Let's have a fundraiser. Do you see what I'm saying? Now, can you take that hadith? No, because that was a very extraordinary situation where this person was very, very poor. You could see it, and the Prophet ﷺ wanted people to donate there straight away. And all the narrations don't, there's several narrations that tell you this story. One of them, it mentions that Prophet actually stopped it. So it wasn't done while giving up the khutbah. Although if you look at the other narrations, it actually makes it seem as though the khutbah was on and the donation was being given. You're not supposed to do anything during the khutbah. You see, it's not a very simple think that you can just take hadith and run with it. On one occasion, there was a janazah going past, a funeral bier, the Prophet stood up. Right? Some people would think from that he stood out of respect. So whenever janazah goes past, you've got to stand up because that's sunnah now. That's what they think. However, it was, the reason for it was that he was an unbeliever. And the Prophet ﷺ did not want that to go over his head, so he stood up, so that it doesn't pass over his head. Totally different reasons. There's a hadith about doing wudu before every meal. So, who does that? Ahmad, you do wudu before you eat. Why not? It says in the hadith. So, you see, wudu is something you guys need to. Wudu literally just means washing your hands. That's basic wudu. Proper wudu, when we say it as a term, as a technical term, it means the full, mashallah, the full wudu. Do you understand? Wudu just means to wash your hands otherwise. So this is what it is: wash your hands, cleanse yourself before eating. We do that, don't we? Right. So you do wudu before eating. Yeah, that wudu, not the big one, right? So, just to give you examples, that this is the hadith we've inherited. In some cases, very clear that. In some cases, it's very clear that the first command the Prophet gave was abrogated, was cancelled. Sometimes the Prophet would mention it himself. That in one hadith, he said, "I used to prohibit you from visiting graveyards." So we know that he used to. It was a prohibition. Then he said, "Al-an fazuruha." However, now you can visit. You should visit. So some cases it's very clear. When something was one way, and then a person did it another way. But in many occasions, it was the ruling was given to an individual. Sahih Bhai would come and he would give him a ruling. Ahmed Bhai, Faisal Saab, they would give different ruling. Now, this is, if you had heard this, you would tell this is what the Prophet said to me. And if you heard him, what would you say? Wouldn't you say that he's wrong? No, he told me that Umar radiallahu anhu once listening to somebody recite in prayer. He said, I was so angry that I was going to break my prayer and stop him. He was reading different. The famous hadith. Like I felt like Umar was like, always. I felt like breaking my prayer to stop him. And I didn't. After prayer, I said, where did you? He said, the Prophet taught me to read this way. No, but the Prophet taught me to read this way. So he went to the Prophet. The Prophet said, okay, fine, you read. So he read, that's right. And then he told Umar, you read, that's right as well. The Quran has been revealed on 7 modes. So you can understand that if that a certain ruling was given, you would stick by that. And why would you think there'd be something different? Because you'd heard it from the Prophet ﷺ. Now, the job of the ulama, so now what happens is that in the time of the Sahaba, they got along with this. Umar radiallahu anhu, whatever issues came up and became a confusing issue, he would have a committee of the prominent and educated of the Sahaba and others. Whenever he needed to, he would consult Aisha radiallahu anha, send somebody to Aisha radiallahu anha, what do you think about this? What was the exact story? And they clarified a number of issues. But there were lots of other issues that weren't clarified. So now come the time of the Tabi'een. So among them, you have different scholars who had studied with the Sahaba and others. They started to teach, and they see people's issues increase. They need more answers. And you don't find all the answers in what the Prophet said directly, because those issues had not arisen in the Prophet. So, mashallah, in the different cities of the Muslim world, different scholars started to do this work of helping people and codifying the Sharia and responding to people's issues. So, give you some names. Who was in Makkah Mukarramah? Who was some of the few big scholars of Makkah Mukarramah? Anybody know? Yes. No, he's Medina Munawwara. Makkah Mukarramah, ibn Abi Rabah, a student of Abdullah ibn Abbas radiallahu anhu. He's considered one of the good jurists from their Mufassirin and other things, right? So in different cities, you had a number of different people. In Sham, one of the biggest ones, his name came out, became well known. Who was the famous scholar of Sham? Imam Awza'i. One of the most famous Muftis of Egypt, who did the similar work to Imam Abu Hanifa in Kufa. So Imam Malik was doing this in Medina Munawwara. Imam Abu Hanifa was doing this in Kufa. Before him, it had already started through people like Imam Nakhai and all that. But when it came to Abu Hanifa, it just, mashallah, expanded. And he became the well-known in the student. That's why he became the most well-known. In Medina Munawwara, it was Imam Malik, rahimahullah. And there were others. Rabi'a al-Ra'i and lot of others. But these people, their work expanded and became well-known and was transferred and passed on to others. In Egypt, if you go there today, one of the most prominent people buried there is Layth ibn Sa'd, rahimahullah. Layth ibn Sa'd. That is where the Egyptian caravans were used to depart from outside his maqam. Right? He was the scholar of Egypt. You know, you could say the Abu Hanifa of Egypt. Right? And then you had other scholars in other towns. They all basically informally started developing a madhhab. They never knew it was going to become madhhab. Just responding to people, they were just answering questions, they were just doing their job. So now, slowly, these four, even though Imam Shafi came so much later, and Imam Ahmad even after him, mashallah, can you believe it? That's Ajib Qulubiyya. Because they were older people than them, and their madhhab just waned and finished. Multiple reasons. Could be that they didn't have enough students to pass it on. You need, to get your message across, you either need social media, right? There was no social media, or students who relate to you. So Imam Abu Hanifa had some amazing students, Imam Yusuf. There's multiple reasons why the Hanafi madhhab dominated, right? Some reasons, Imam Muhammad wrote all of these books, but then other scholars there, students wrote books. But I think one big reason was that Imam Abu Yusuf, rahimahullah, the direction of Imam Abu Hanifa, and actually a teacher of Imam Muhammad as well. These are the three main Hanafi scholars, right? Imams, founding Imams. He became the Qadi al-Qudat, the Chief Justice of the Abbasid Empire. And then the Abbasids had this inclination towards the Hanafis. Right? So they would generally employ Hanafi judges in there, and Abbasids had the world. Abbasids started in 132 Hijri, and it stayed until the 600. That's like 500 years. Yes, their influence waned afterwards, though they were still the teaching the heads eventually afterwards. But initially, they controlled everything. When you say Harun al-Rashid, Abu Ja'far al-Mansur, and all these other people. Yes, then we had a little bout of Mu'tazilis, and within them, even then there'll be some Hanafis and Mu'tazils, but then we don't get into that right now. That could be one of the reasons. Then after that, some of the major dynasties, major ruling families and ruling factions or rulers of the world. So in terms of who are Arab, but the Abbasids and Umayyads, but the Abbasids are primarily Hanafi leaning. Umayyads is kind of before the madhhab time. They were not, the madhabs are not being developed by them. Then you have the Seljuks, right? Primarily Hanafi. Although there's some interesting Shafi'i things going on in the Nizam al-Mulk and so on, not figured that out yet. And then you've got the Ottomans, came later, Ayyubid Shafi'i. There's Salahuddin Kurdish. Fatimid Shia, there are the Arabs. But then you had the Mamluks, various different Mamluks, the Circassian Mamluks and the other Mamluks, Turkic origin. Samanids were Hanafis, right, up in the Uzbekistan area. And then the Ottomans, 600 years, or what is it, 500-600 years altogether, Hanafis. So that could be one of the reasons why it's Hanafi like that, and then just develop. So the madhab of, for example, Ibn Jarir al-Tabari, rahimahullah, the madhab of Awza'i, madhab of Ibn Hazm al-Zahiri, the madhab of Layth ibn Sa'd, the madhab of Nakhai, the madhab of all these others that were doing the same work, similar work at the same time, it did not last. It's up to Allah who He chooses. What I'm amazed about is Imam Ahmad came later. He's a student of Imam Shafi. And Imam Shafi, born in the year Imam Abu Hanifa dies. Can you see how much later? Whereas this effort had started before. But mashallah, Allah accepts them. I don't know. Okay? You can obviously go into that of why that's the case. Now, if you want and you want to follow Ibn Hazm al-Zahiri's madhhab, well, you have to try to find all of his opinions, and then there must be a very good reason why you want to do that. Because there's just no development. There's no development. It's developed it. The Hanafi, Shafi'i, Maliki, and Hanbali have been developed. And I would probably say that from a fiqh perspective, Hanafis and Malikis are probably more developed than the Shafi'is and the Hanbalis. You can just correct me if I say anything about the Hanbalis. Oh, you put them before? Okay. I think in terms of Nawazil, the more than novel issues, there may be the basic hadith on, they're very high up there. But in terms of new issues, new fatwa, the Malikis are really up there. That's right. The Malikis under the Banu Ahmar, the Murabitun, a number of these North Africa and Andalusia. The Andalusian Umayyads, they must have been Maliki as well. It's an amazing history you should read. Get off your football for a while. All right? And read this stuff. I'm telling you, it's amazing. All that cloudy, you're like, what happened? Why can't we be one? I love it the way it is. Because I love to meet my Shafi'i brothers and Maliki brothers and just have a good discussion. I celebrate that. I enjoy that. But some people, they're like, no, it needs to be one. But look, number one, these differences aren't even a problem. They're not an aqidah difference because all their aqidah is just be the same. You've had weird deviants from some of these madhabs that they were Mu'tazili or what else? Maybe Mujassim, proper anthropomorphist or whatever. But the majority, it's always been, look, Ra'yi Sahih. This became a motto. Ra'yi Sahih yahtamilu al-khata. Wa ra'yuka khata yahtamilu al-sawab. My opinion is correct. It has the potential of being incorrect. I acknowledge that. Your opinion is incorrect, but has the potential of being correct. And you, as a Shafi'i, are doing what was required of you. I am, as a Hanafi, doing what was required of me. Because the Prophet ﷺ said that the person qualified, in the Ijtihad al-Hakim, the person qualified to undertake Ijtihad and study and analyze and derive rulings. As long as they've done their job and in a qualified way, then whatever conclusion they came up with, it's either going to be yes or no, halal or haram, whatever, right? It can only be two options or three options. Only one of them is actually going to be right according to Allah. So let's just take a simple case that somebody comes to me with a divorce issue, goes to another mufti. I say, I think it is a divorce. The other mufti said, no, I don't think it's a divorce. Who's right? According to Allah, there must be only one right. They can't both be. We're both right in the sense that we've done what we're supposed to do. Is to try to find an answer. That much, that endeavor is right. But in terms of getting what is right according to Allah, only Allah knows that. I'm going to think my conclusion is right. He's going to think his conclusion is right. On the day of judgment, we're going to figure out all the big meeting with the Shafis and Hanafis and Hanbalis and Malikis. Like, okay, let's see how many masali you are right in, how many you are right in, how many you are right in. Do you think we're going to do that? I don't know. I really think sometimes they will when they stayed in paradise. No, I don't know. I mean, I'd like to see a lot of movies in paradise. Battle of Badr, Battle of Uhud. But then you sometimes think, are we ever going to get away from the distractions of paradise? We can think about it. It's a real conundrum. Then we can do that. So Sheikh Anwar Shah Kashmiri, who lifelong studied the hadiths and tried to defend the Hanafi school and respond to these things, he said, am I going to find out? Are we going to find out who was the correct? Because just going back to the hadith says that if you do get and achieve what is right according to Allah, you get 2 rewards. And if you got it wrong, you still get 1 reward for trying. Because you're qualified. So now, I guess when you look at your book of deeds and scrutinize it, you'll find out whether you're right or wrong. You got 2 rewards for this one. I got 1 mark for this one. You'll probably find out then. Not us. Right? So anyway, that's why I don't think it's going to come together, because there have been efforts, by the way, in the past to try to make it one madhab. Was it Abu Ja'far al-Mansur? who tried to do this with the Malik's Muwatta, that will make this the code of law. No, I said no. Because see another wisdom of this, wisdom, is that the Prophet must have said or done all of these different things because he did do Raful Yadayn, raising the hands in the beginning. He did that multiple times in the prayer, even before sujood and before and after sujood, in between, like 7 times. 7 times. Shafis don't say that, Hanbalis don't say that either. They just say do it twice extra, before and after ruku, right? How about you come back from sujood?
Yes, come back from sujood
As well. Okay. So
no,
not from after sujood when you stand back up, but the second rakat. Like he would say, there's differences. Okay, so Hanafi said no, even that got abrogated. That was initially done, but later it wasn't, because we have hadith which said the Prophet ﷺ only did it at the beginning. They have a hadith, we have a hadith. They said that, oh, that was the final. We said, no, this is the final, that was before. Can you see how they reconciled it? We're not disagreeing with that. We're not saying it never happened. We're just saying that it didn't happen at the end. It eventually became much more, less movement. So, but through the 4 madhahib, all the actions of the Prophet ﷺ are alive. And that's just the wisdom, or whatever it's worth. So it's not going to come to that. If I want to put a logical twist onto this, some people just don't like it. I remember once I was in a program, some victims and others, and I was like, why can't we just be one? And they were just, why can't we be one? I said, actually, stop wasting your time. We definitely need to minimize any more differences of opinion. We need to stay together and, we need to learn to live together and not let it bother us. But it's not all going to be one, because the Prophet made a dua and it wasn't accepted. Remember, he made those 3 du'as, 2 were accepted, 1, my ummah will never differ, that was not accepted, right? Some people don't like that. They said, no, what is so right? They said, no, Allah can change it. If you change it, alhamdulillah, I'll welcome it. But let's not cry over it. Let's learn to live. So, mashallah, we have 2 Eids. I prefer 1 day, but I'm completely happy. I mean, you should educate yourself when you do it the other day, but I would still say Eid Mubarak to you. Just don't think it's a big problem until you educate yourself. It's a reality. Just deal with the reality. I'll give you one example. A friend of mine was an imam in South Africa, in a town, in a city in South Africa. And they were both Shafis and Hanafis in the community. They would do Tarawih prayer together. Imagine they would do Tarawih prayer together. And then for the witr, one group would stay here and do witr. The other one would go into that room or that room and do witr their way. And they were happy doing this for years. I think Imam came, the savior, and he said, this is ikhtilaf. This is a problem. And he insisted that everybody start praying together. Hanafis are unhappy if they do it this way, Shafis are unhappy if they do it this way. Can you see now, in form they became the same, but their hearts were divided. So this same Australian brother, right? This same Australian brother said, we don't need to, now these are some normal arguments. Said they had 4 mihrabs in the haram. I said, do they still have it? I said, no. So I said, what are you talking about it for? They had it for some time. They don't have it anymore. Why they use these anecdotal issues to make it sound like this is some big ikhtilaf. And then in the past, we have had where certain brothers have gone a bit hot and, there's been a bit of an issue. Not for the majority. They have. So they don't bring that as an excuse from 1300 years or 1250 years or 1300 years of this. Oh, look, this is what happens. You're the one creating the ikhtilaf. You stop creating ikhtilaf. To be honest, if somebody came and said they want to follow Al-Bani or Abdul Aziz bin Baz or whoever, and they want to pray differently, Mubarak, do it. If you've got evidence, do it. No problem. The problem we have is where they say everybody else is wrong. That is the issue. I have no problem with a person praying something different. As long as he knows what he's doing, as long as he's got some evidence for what it is. Alhamdulillah. That's why, mashallah, among the Salafis, the LP Salafis were always decent. You could discuss with them, right? And they would be willing to entertain. But those which, unfortunately, I think on unless they were just the loudest ones, the majority, they were just like, no, the other way. But alhamdulillah, we can say that it's much better now. So I think that's the reason why there's only 4 madhhabs left today. And Hanbali madhhab has just got a resurgence. Alhamdulillah. Inshallah. Inshallah. All the madhhabs can stay. But the Hanbali madhhab was really, really, you can say, an oppressed madhhab in a sense that those who were Hanbalis, they thought there was something else, so I don't know. But alhamdulillah, people are turning back to it. It's amazing. But it's been such a waste of 25 years, and I pray to Allah that Allah doesn't allow us to waste time, because we could have done so much more. The amount of books that were written, the amount of lectures that were given, the amount of arguments and debates that took place, websites, and subhanAllah, what a waste. Because